You are listening to Been There, Done That. We present some of the smartest people connected to the business of coffee. People who've succeeded in the tough grind of hospitality by staying ahead of the rest. So join us as we explore the secrets to their success and help you accelerate your business. This show is brought to you by the Coffee Commune, where the coffee community comes to collaborate. Enjoy the show.
Hi there, Phil Di Bella here, the founder and managing director of the Coffee Commune, and you're listening to another episode of Been There, Done That, when we bring amazing people with great expertise to the table to share their knowledge and wisdom so that we can help you accelerate your potential. And today, we're doing a bit of a post-mortem on the election, and as I said, doesn't matter who you barrack for or don't barrack for, get on with it. We've got the government, democracy has spoken, and we now get on and do what we need to. So we thought in this episode, I wanted to bring somebody that I know is no nonsense, has certainly been there and done that, and we're going to tackle the industrial relations and human resource portfolio and tackle some of the stuff from the government. But I bring to the show Tim Dive. Tim, great to see you. I've known Tim for a few years and worked with him closely. He is now the founder and director of the HR Cartel, a company that provides affordable HR and industrial relations solutions to small and medium-sized businesses. That's where he specializes, especially micro, small, and medium-sized. For those that don't need an in-house person, he's your go-to. He's also the host of the HR Cartel Podcast, a no bullshit podcast, I call it. I've been on it a couple of times, and Tim just tells it as it is. He has over 20 years of experience in the HR and IR space, particularly in mining, construction, oil and gas. But of course, as we know, IR and HR sits across all industries and sectors. He really focuses on helping smaller employers navigate complex, now remember that word, complex workplace regulations and improve their performance. Tim, absolute honour to have you on the show.
Great pleasure. It's all mine. I hope I can give some real insights to...
You will, mate. I just have to make sure you don't get as passionate as you do on your HR Cartel. No, but I love your HR Cartel. You tell it. There's no bullshit. Straight at it. If you haven't heard it, download it. We'll put the links up on the on the show as well. But he does a great job with that, and he tells it how it is. And I love because, like we said, you tackle the complex workplace regulations, and in order to improve performance, but a big one. And as I know, Tim, works closely here with my wife, Jana, who's in charge of our people, performance and compliance. And of course, the big part of that portfolio is the compliance. And you virtually single-handedly look after our compliance stuff, through because we've engaged your organisation to do that, as I encourage others. I don't have to have an IR specialist on board. I've got you. So to speak, on the payroll as a consultant on the side, and we get some great information intel. So compliance is what we're going to talk about today.
Sure.
But there's a few things obviously in the hospitality industry, but I want to set it up a bit, Tim. With the current government in their previous 3-year terms, there was over 27, I believe, legislation changes, IR and HR. They call it reforms. Mm-hmm. I normally say reform should help people, not disable them. But we saw over 27 different ones. Can you give us a bit of a summary, a snapshot of what that looked like in the past 3 years before the election that's just happened now? A summary of because the same government's been voted back in.
Yep.
Give us a bit of a summary. And keep it HR specific if you can, but if not, doesn't matter. But just so the listeners understand what the government did in 3 years in that IR and HR space.
Yeah, so there were 3 key bills they put forward, and they were it was 2 really, but the second one was split into 2 because it was too controversial. It went too far. The first was the Secure Jobs Better Pay Act. And then the closing loopholes 1 and 2, the one that got split. So essentially what then happened was this new government came into power and like a wrecking ball went through the IR system, which is what the left side of politics does because they're so associated to the ACTU, the union movement. So there's a lot of volume inside that Labor Party that when they get the chance, they absolutely take it with both hands. This time around, the last 3 years, this government really did do that and they pushed through a lot of reform or change. Now, the changes that they put through in these bills, they really are targeted at the top end of town. The practices that these big businesses take. Now, you can understand that too, because if you look at what Qantas have done in the past, for example.
Yeah, totally understandable.
Yeah. So big businesses don't have the best track record when it comes to looking after people.
So your big end, just for the listeners, is Qantas, BHP.
Yep.
The likes of those companies, right?
Those
PwC, all those guys, right?
Yeah.
Just so people understand, the listeners, because obviously our audience is that micro, small, and medium.
Yeah.
So one of the major reforms, most reforms, are to target those big guys. And so go on. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and things that that all of our small and medium-sized business owners would be familiar with, terms like the right to disconnect, same job, same pay. These types of things which have been in the conversation the last few years, these were targeted or designed to target these big tier ones, the BHPs and the likes. What we found, though, and what you can see clear as day, is that these big companies that have law firms as teams and consultants and big HR teams, it's not affecting them that much, right? These small and medium-sized and micro businesses get caught up in all this battlefield, and we're the ones that get our backs to the wall, and that shows in how many small businesses have closed the doors in the last.
So we summarise that part is, so the let's call it good intention is to stop the big companies, from exploiting their teams, and exploit might be a bit rough, but to make sure that there's a fair workplace for employees at those big levels. But what they actually do is the big guys have got the law teams and everyone else to manage all that legislation, to manage all the paperwork and the documentation. The micro, small, and medium businesses don't have that resource. They don't have the money to pay high-powered lawyers to draw up agreements and contracts and decipher what that actually means. So that's obviously point number one, is that it's not they're applying a same same thing fits all shoes, or whatever the saying is.
Well, a good way to think about that is, look, I don't, regardless of what you may take away from listening to one of my podcasts or hear me rant at some point, I'm not anti-union. I'm not anti-left of politics.
They all have a place, right?
Well, they do, but the way we've got to understand this is that these politicians, these unions, these delegates, they don't wake up every day going, I'm going to go and ruin a company today. They don't do that, right? It isn't economies that run the world, it's ideologies. Yeah. Ideologies decide where the money goes. These people just have an ideology that they honestly believe the world should work this way. And there's no filter for if you're 2 people big, 10 people big, 50 people big, or 1,000 people big. All you need to do is listen to the someone called Sally McManus, who's the secretary of the ACTU, who represents all the trade unions, and they absolutely believe there should be no leeway given or restrictions given to smaller businesses with the laws that come out. So they think everyone should be treated just like a Qantas or a BHP, and that's my ideology is that that's just wrong.
Yeah,
it's just wrong.
Well, you don't have the resources to do it. You're not encouraging entrepreneurship. You're not encouraging startups. So if we bring that into the hospitality space, obviously, like you mentioned a couple of things like right to disconnect, which is fair enough. I mean, I say to my teams, I might send you an email at 11 o'clock at night or 4 in the morning because I'm awake, but I don't expect a response. But some industries, where does it start and stop? Because some industries, it's 24/7 industries, your medical workers, your hospitality, your breakdown services, all the rest of it. So there's that sort of grey area, but we'll tackle that one after because I still want to come back. So you talked about that. Well, what was the second thing that that in the last 3 years that they brought out that they're focused on?
Oh, look, the second thing. Well, there's been way more than 2 things, but if I could rant, I'd tell you all go all through it. But look, it's been a massive push, and we there's no need, I think, today to talk about the union movement and that sort of stuff. But a big push was to give way more flexibilities in that area as well, and they did that. And a lot of the reforms, as they called it, were designed for that. But what that means for smaller companies, even if you don't have members, is that these unions do have access to your company now lawfully to walk in, even without members, and start to advocate for what they call potential members. That was a big shift in mindset that we all have to get used to. Before the last 3 years, a union had a clear scope of work. It was only allowed to represent the industrial interests of a member. It had to have a member.
So you're saying they can now walk into the coffee commune,
Any company.
at any time, regardless of whether you've got a union or not, and whether there's people that are members or not, and have control.
That's correct. So you have to deal with them if they're acting in the representation of an industrial interest. These are the words that they use, of a potential member. That means that any of your staff, if there is a union that could serve them, then they have the right to walk in and start to represent those interests. So you can't decline that access, that entry, and you can't decline having that conversation without a dispute happening then. So what that means, not to be alarmist, but what that means is, we've got a significant problem in this country now that we all, both sides of government will even agree to this, we all have to fix, which is productivity. Productivity is a dirty word to the union side. It's just as dirty as profitability or profit, right? If you have a interfering delegate, an interfering union, and you're trying to drive productivity measures by performance management in your workforce, they are not going to like that. They hate it. They will try to defend or stop it from happening. So not to be alarmist, but
you need to be aware.
You have to be aware of this, and why that's relevant to the ideology and what they've changed in the last 3 years is this. The government now has no other option but to understand productivity and how to get it back. It's going to be a very difficult job for this current government to do that with the ties they have to that side of politics, that side of the union.
Well, the ideology that you're talking about.
The ideology, it's against their ideology. So now, employers have to fix it themselves internally. They have to get productivity back. We do that by performance management, by carefully structuring our wage systems and that sort of thing. That's how we do it.
So let's explore that, right?
Yeah.
How can hospitality business owners be preparing for this? So in terms of obviously they're obviously through their contracts, through their induction program. So talk us through that. So if you're now giving advice to businesses, micro, small, and medium, and I add micro because there's a lot of businesses that are 1 to 3 employees, right? So if you're giving that advice like you have done to the Coffee Commune and to Jana, what's that for the listeners? What does that mean? Well, how can they start looking at best protection, best practice?
Well, if you look back at the last 3 years and you go, what's happened? Well, our cost has gone up, and we look forward for the next 3 years and we see what this current government's told us. Are we confident that cost is going to keep on going up or stop going up? I think we're not confident about that stopping at all. So cost is going to be a massive thing. What's a company that employs people, what's their biggest cost? It's always going to be
wages,
people.
Right? And to just for your information, Tim, wages used to be 30% of your turnover. Wages are now around 45% of turnover. So you can see over the years, and that's only we're talking over probably the last 6 years, and that's not just blaming the last government. That's the one before it as well. That's the Scott Morrison government. Both sides of politics, the Liberal government and the Labor government, have driven wages to where they are now, which is 45% of turnover for most cafes and restaurants. Some are operating at 55%. Yeah. Right? But it used to be an average of 30. The ATO website used to say 30 is the benchmark. Now it's 45%. So that we've seen for a fact of what you're saying is it's driven up, and you're predicting that will continue to go.
It absolutely will, and this is so the ideology argument will always filter through this, because the first point in cost and wages and how it relates is, look, next month we've got a Fair Work Commission decision coming out of the wage increases for the next year. That's coming in June. So the ideology of the union part of this government is that every year these decisions should be above inflation decisions, where traditionally they've been at CPI. Over the last 3 years with what's happened, we've seen some above inflation. So their push, and they're pushing internally inside the government to force Albanese and his colleagues to order the commission make above inflation wage increases for all wards. That's one thing you've got to be mindful of. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you pay above a ward right now, you've got to make sure that your contracts are offsetting not just entitlements like penalties and loadings and these types of things, but also any wage increase is going to come in that you can absorb within your current cost structure. If you can absorb that, absorb it. Please absorb it. Now, how do we reward people if we're not going to give them pay increases? Well, there are ways, right?
But just pause on that one too, because there's you have to give the wage increase if they're on award. You've got no choice, right? You
If
can't
they're
pay
paid that
under it.
rate.
Yeah, if you're on that award rate, you can't pay under the award, right?
Yep.
If you're paying above the award, you need to see where the new award's going to. And if you're still above that award, then you're fine, right?
Yep.
But if you're not, you need to obviously lift it, because the one thing you don't want to be doing, and that's a legal requirement, not just a humanity requirement, is paying below award.
Yeah.
And that's something that we tell everybody, right? The award's there for a reason, whether you believe it or you don't believe it. You know, you don't want to be breaching compliance by paying under the award. And the other point I just want to make is that if the CPI then is 3% and they want a 5% increase, or the CPI is 1% and they want a 2% increase, listeners, this is what you have to understand, is that your 45% of your wages now has just gone to 48% of your wages unless you put your prices up. And that's why it's a spiral to the top, and why people say, why am I paying $7 for a coffee now? Why am I paying $20 for bacon and eggs? Because that's what happens when you drive wages up. The wages drive the price of things up, and then it becomes a circle motion, right?
Yeah, that's right. And now you see the issue that I'm telling you the government has with getting productivity back into an acceptable place, because that just reduces productivity again. Whereas if you can absorb the cost of wages going up, produce more for the same cost,
Yeah, so more customers,
you're solving the productivity issue. This is what we have to do. But you know, cost is the big thing going forward, and you need to understand the ideology to try and determine what decisions might be made that restrict employers. So,
and that was going to be one of the questions. What is, and I mean, you've answered half of it. What should the listeners be? What can they plan for the next 3 years?
Yeah.
So you've answered half of that, which is, you know, there's not going to be any slowing down on wage increases. There will be yearly wage increases that will need to go out. And that's normal, you know, to a certain level. But as you've explained, correct me if I'm wrong, normal is normally CPI.
Yep.
What they're going to try and drive is above CPI increases, which therefore then means you've got to put your prices up, which means prices go up, wages need to go up, wages go up, prices need to go up. And the biggest cause there is productivity. Yeah. And we're seeing it, Tim, because what have we seen in trending in 2024? 1 in 10 cafes closed their doors. We thought it'd be 1 in 13. 1 in 10 closed. And the number one reason was wages. So even though people say cost of good, you know, or our cost, what they actually mean is, and we've dissected the data, it's the wages was the cost. So anyone that was operating at 50, you know, put it this way, for the 1 in 10 places that closed down, all of their wages were above 50% of their turnover.
Yeah.
Right, which is telling. It's a great indication, right? Data doesn't lie, and then you've got to be able to analyze that data and build the strategy. So that's obviously another. What else can we expect from the government now in the next 3 years, so that listeners can be prepared? Again, it's not about alarming them; it's about let's get them prepared. Yeah,
that's right. And yeah, I mentioned the shift in mindset before with one of my answers I gave you, and there's a number of shifts in mindset that have to happen, but for all sides here. One of those shifts is in small and micro especially, but also medium-sized businesses often don't have all their documentation under control, or it's out of date. And it's not hard to be out of date when you've got such an active and proactive government that changes legislation quite frequently. That's going to continue, right? So the reason why I point that as one of the main things you've got to be aware of and understand is because wage theft is now a thing. Now, just because you pay above an award wage, your contracts need to be written in a certain way that allow you to offset things and control that in such a way that you don't fall into a trap where you're not compliant with a modern award condition just by default, which then results in a criminal charge coming at you.
So let's pause that one. Listeners, I can't stress this enough, and Tim's going to explain why. Please do not tell me you don't have contracts for your employees. And that's regardless, right? If they're permanent, if they're full-time, or if they're part-time, you must have contracts for your employees. Is that a fair call, Tim?
Absolutely. And I am still alarmed that companies that come to us that have been operating, some of them, more than 10 years, that never had contracts and still don't.
And that's going to be, so Tim's just given it to you. Heard from an expert. We've spent some time dissecting the past. Now we're looking the future. One of the big things, right, obviously, is the increase in wages. That'll keep going up. So we need to start planning for that and all the rest of it, and see where else you can reduce your costs, because your biggest cost is in hospitality is your labour. So where can I look at reducing other costs? But the next big one is going to be the compliance side. You must have contracts for your staff, no matter what they are. And it's companies like Tim. He's too humble to promote himself, but I'll promote him because I know how good he is at what he does, and I've put him onto many businesses that now use him. And he's very, very affordable because he works with micro, small, and medium business. Get contracts in place. Tim has contracts that he can show you that fast tracks it, but every person in your organization needs contracts because the government is going to be chasing that sort of stuff. And in those contracts, the things they need to look for is obviously the working hours.
That's right. Well, yeah, a whole range of things. I think if we're talking about people in hospitality, probably listening to this recording, casual employees. Now, this is a big one for your industry. I think it was, I forget which year it was or which bill it was that passed, but nonetheless, the laws and the definitions of what defines a casual employee changed. The wording changed. Your contract wording had to change to keep up with it. Now, if you've got contracts in place right now, you may still be at risk of having some problems with your casual employees. Right now, a casual employee is able to just say to you, I'm permanent now. And you've got to have a pretty good business case to say, no, you're not.
6 months, isn't it? Once they're with you, 6 months?
Yeah, it's a smaller size business with less than 15 is about a year. Okay. And there's a whole range of things that go around that may give you an ability to justify a reasonable business case to say no. But your documentation, how you set things up, how you understand the terms of employment to be and how your employees understand it to be is also way more important, because if a claim comes at you for whatever reason from an employee, the Fair Work Commission, the commissioners are required to follow the lead of the employee. By law, they must believe what the employee says is true until the employer can prove it isn't so. The only way you can do that is by producing something. Yeah. And if you can't produce something, then good luck in that battle.
Such a contract. The employee has signed this contract. They've agreed and that they've read it. They understand it. Therefore, there's part one of your proof, right?
That's right. Yeah, email correspondence, file notes of conversations that happened. Something an employee said 1 month ago, they may change their mind, or they may say they didn't say that, or they didn't mean that. Now,
get it in writing.
That's right. Yeah, even just email yourself a record.
Now, it might sound alarmist, guys, but can I tell you, and Tim will tell you this, this is what to look forward to in the next 3 years. Not look forward in a good way, but be prepared, because the whole purpose of this podcast and why I wanted you on the show as early as possible post-election is to get people prepared, because a lot of people got caught off guard in the last 3 years. Don't believe in such things, that won't happen, because we're seeing that's just been blown out of the water. The things that we thought wouldn't happen have happened, and compliance, people coming and checking on your contract, employees wanting and demanding more is going to happen. And I always say a good employer always looks after a good employee.
Yep.
And that's not where the problem lies and finds for me. And I've employed thousands of staff over many years, right? It's not the good employers or the good employees that are the problem. It's those rogue one or two that want to milk the system, that see a loophole. But if you're prepared and you've got best practice, then you're going to be more immune. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's your own line of defense. I often say that a contract is one item that will help protect you, but all a contract should do is guarantee and set out absolutely clearly what the employment terms are. The employer's version of the Fair Work Act is your employee handbook or your set of policies. That's the most powerful thing to have. So
after the contract, you've got an employee handbook.
That's right. Okay. We recommend for these smaller businesses an employee handbook. You don't want to have this entire library of standalone policies that's confusing and hard to follow. A simple handbook tells your employees exactly how you run your company, what the expectations are, and that's a strong document.
So things like no phones on shift, must wear closed shoes, appropriate, can't chew chewing gum while you're serving, or my pet hates in hospitality. So obviously they all have to go into a handbook. Yeah. We do that here, obviously through your help, through the induction program. So step one, guys, and get onto it. This is an action item for anyone that is listening to this and goes, oh, geez, I'm exposed. Don't panic, just get sorted. Yeah. Step one, contract, right? And we might even be able to persuade Tim as an action item to put some of this up on our app. Mm-hmm. So the checklist, if I can ask, if you'd be so kind.
We can do that.
A checklist, contract, a handbook, part of an induction program, so that the do's and the don'ts, and of course using somebody like yourself reaching out, because you're part of the commune as well, our community, reaching out. We've got over 1,200 cafes in our community. So, and I can assure you, I'd hate to say this, but probably half of them wouldn't have contracts or handbooks. So they need to. So if you can put that up on the app, that would be great.
We'll do, yeah.
And then what else can protect you after that?
After that, it's about management. It's about your leadership style after that, because performance management, which we may touch on today or not, performance management, in my view, is really a leadership style in smaller companies.
Now, when you say performance management, let's talk about it now.
Yeah.
That is both good and bad performance management. That's right? So it's obviously, because I say, when at the moment they hear performance management, they think, well, that's a negative connotation because that's a clinical terminology. But when we say, let's break it down, so let's segue straight to performance management.
Yeah.
Rewarding. Let's go to the positive first. Rewarding good performance. What does performance management for good performance look like? What can you do and can't you do in terms, and for somebody listening to this saying, I've got a great performing team and I want to look after them, do better. What are the tips, the do's and the don'ts in that area? Yeah. And then we'll talk about the negative performance management.
Yeah, okay. Look, it's hard to jump straight to that because you're talking about the outcome of good performance, and you've got to get there first.
Okay, I'll let you take over. You're the expert.
Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll explain it in this way, because we're talking about smaller companies here. Yeah. And smaller companies are busy companies. And people in there are very busy. Leaders are busy. They get promoted usually to more senior positions because they were good at what they did, right? Not because they're career leaders. So more often than not, the businesses that we walk into aren't ready to implement a performance management framework, a formal framework that's structured and has rigor and all this sort of stuff. They just aren't ready for that. Usually, the very first thing we will do is go, look, we're going to do a little 60-second exercise here. Here's your list of people in a spreadsheet. I'm going to give you 4 attributes. They might be reliability and trust, and I might say current performance and potential performance. Give me a score out of 5 for each of those people. You've done that in 60 seconds. If you're taking too long to do that, then I don't want the result. You thought too much about it. I want to just get a pulse.
Yeah, get a pulse.
What's happening, right?
Pulse.
Yeah. And the very first thing we're going to do is identify your bottom 10% on that list and say, well, there's your target right there, right? The very first thing you must do for your team is improve that portion right there and maintain the rest. Now, are we getting them up? Or are we getting them out? Yeah. Right. Now that might sound hard or harsh to some people.
Improve or remove.
That's right. In a world where cost is everything right now, continuing to carry dead weight in your company is fatal.
Well, let's flip it. I said it before. No good employer does not look after a good employee. And if you've got that 10% that's taking up the resources and the time, the good employer all of a sudden can't look after good employees because they're focused on the 10% that need to improve or remove. Yep. So flipping it that way, if you are, it's not harsh at all. If you are looking at your 10%, and for those listening to this, identify, and I'm going to give you a tool I use now, listeners, but identify that 10% and get them to improve or remove so that you can get back to looking after the ones that deserve it. And the model I use, Tim, which and I've explained to you, is a traffic light system. Yep. So every month, my wife will go through our teams and we'll talk to the leaders and talk to at all levels, different layers of leaders, and we'll say, right, let's analyze your team, and it's the barometer feel. It's that instant pulse. Are they green, which means they're flying? They're doing great. So let's keep supporting them, keep doing what we're doing to keep them flying. Are they orange? Look, they're really good and got potential, but they need some more support. Yep. And that support might be, training or coaching or focus or mentoring or skills assessment, and let's give it the resources that they need. And then we've got the red box. And the red box is you put the 10%, the improve or remove. And I always, like in our organization, it normally is no more than, it's normally a 0 to about 6 or 7% of the organization that are sitting in that. And I think that's quite healthy. But they'll improve and remove. So I just wanted to flush that out and give the listeners a practical tool, but we've also got to be fair with that tool, and it's not got to be an ego and emotion. Yeah. It's got to be, hey, their skills are good, but their attitude looks a bit lackluster, or hey, their attitude's really good, but I need to teach them a little bit better in their skills. Identifying the key things and breaking down. So
we're not that system isn't wielding an axe. It's identifying where we can get the quickest win. And that is where you can get the quickest win. And the reason why that is because your top performers are slowed down by the anchor. right? Now, the more your top performers stretch away from that bottom 10%, the more friction and arguments happen in your workforce. Now you're spending all your time dealing with that, right?
Poor culture.
Yeah, it ruins everything.
Distraction.
Yeah, it ruins everything.
And productivity. Because remember the number one thing that Tim talked about, and I'll add one to it, which is what I spend most of my time on at the Coffee Commune with my teams and myself, is how do I build myself so efficient so that I can be more productive? And simply put, around your workforce and performance, like Tim's just said, if you've got 10% of your organization that's not performing and it's taking up all your time, well, that's not efficient. And the moment you're not efficient, you're not productive. So you need to really, really identify that and get onto it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, of course, then look, after that point, the next conversation I'm going to have with the business is, let's identify the detractors. You mentioned culture there, right? Yes. Where's the detractors? Now, the detractors are at two ends of the business. The ones in the middle are all good. Now, you understand what I mean by that in a second. You might hear people like Gary Vee talk about this, the high performer who kills all the sales targets, but he's toxic and he upsets everybody, he pisses everybody off. You got to get rid of that guy or girl, whatever, But what he leaves out is, if we're going to do that, well, we've also got to get rid of the low-performing sweethearts, the people who are nice and lovely and great friends with the managers. You have to, because people get upset by the people who piss them off, right? And that's easy for them to see. But they also get disheartened and disengaged by seeing people who don't perform as well as they do get a free run through the business. It's
a great point.
Right?
It really is a great point. If you're going to wield the axe at the top like that, hey, these guys are really bringing in the revenue, but they're real shits to deal with, and you're going to axe them like Gary Vee talks about. Well, then you should be doing it with your lovely. These people are so lovely. They're beautiful. They're wonderful to have around, but they're just not productive. They're not contributing to the organization. They're relying on everybody else in terms of results. The axe has got to go there too. It's a great point.
Yeah, that's right. And they're the ones that people think, well, but they're great for culture. They're good people. They're friendly. They laugh. They talk to everybody. They're great friendships, but they're not good for culture, right? They aren't, because their low performance sets the standard.
Yeah.
People want to work well. They want to work good. They want to see outcomes of their good performance, and having those people stay there doesn't achieve that. Now, if we've got leaders who have gone through that process that we've just stepped through, those two sort of activities, and they're working actively on that bottom 10%, we can now start to have conversations with those leaders about performance management frameworks. They can now start to get the picture, and we can design something and implement something that's going to work and be effective. And it's a case-by-case basis. We design things according to the strategy of the company.
So therefore, how would we reward, on that, right? You've got the staff that are motivated, they're productive, they're loyal. How would you go about, what sort of HR practices do you recommend in working with those people?
Yeah. Again, case by case, different workplaces have different needs. And different people have different needs as well.
That's a good point, because I always say money's not the only love language, right?
That's right.
And there's a whole book written about it and programs about people's different love languages. So another great one for the team members is, when you're onboarding your team, find out what their love language is. Is it that care, attention, communication? Is it that, hey, gifting? What is it that speaks their language? Because there is more than one ways to reward somebody. Not just with money, right?
That's right, there is. And that could be any range of things. It could be the opportunity to learn a certain skill that's going to get them somewhere in 3 years. That's a good one, right? Because you identify what people want, and you identify these things by performance discussions, right?
Yes.
So when we start to implement this framework, this system, when they're ready for it, we can start to get really valuable information that's meaningful for both sides. And we can go, right, well, I can guarantee you that for the next 3 years, I'll help you go through this course and into management, leadership, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be that. It can be anything. But what that also does is we can now retain that person, right? We've got a commitment for them that they're going to stick with you while you stick with them on this development pathway. You don't have to give them that job at the end of the pathway, but you've got them for 3 years now, and that's worth paying a couple of $1,000 for a course.
Of course.
So that's one way that you can retain someone, reward them, and that sort of thing. Of course, you can give them bonuses, incentives, and that sort of stuff. And
on that, I some of the tips I used, Tim, and one of the things I was trying to work with both sides of government, only one showed up, unfortunately, but was the FBT policy. And Peter Dutton gave us a commitment that, and we helped him he was really interested in how that looked. And we said, no, we don't want it on alcohol. It's not a booze tax. We don't want it for the big end of town. It's limited to 10 million turnover. So it really is around that micro, small and medium business. And it's not for employees. So it's not for government workers. It really is an FBT, which means part of my reward and where it came about was, and it was the same thing I wanted to put forward to the Albanese government, and they were invited to show up, but didn't show up, unfortunately. The policy was simple. I want to be able to give my staff, if they're doing it tough at the moment, petrol vouchers.
Yep.
Or I want to be able to give them grocery vouchers, or I want to buy them, something, or I want to give them a company car to use for the next 12 months. And all of those things attract a tax. So on one side, and this is one of my bugbears, as you know, the government is saying, and the IR and HR guys at the top and ivory towers are saying, you must look after your staff or we're going to fine you stupid amounts of money. And then here are good employers going, I want to reward my good employees, right? They don't just want pay increases, because of course the government benefits from that, from tax and, and superannuation and the rest of it. But they want something that's meaningful. They want, in some cases, dinner in a restaurant for two that they wouldn't pay for themselves, or they want, a Coles voucher. And we did that ourselves. We did that anyway during COVID. We did that. We still do that now if some people are doing it tough. But we've got to pay FBT on that. We've got to pay a tax to look after. And frightfully, a lot of people listening to this go, well, what is FBT? Fringe benefits tax. What is it? Well, it's actually a employee incentive tax. If you really want to use the right name, you are being charged a tax to look after your staff, which I believe is a crock of shit, right? And I'm very passionate and vocal about that because it's counterintuitive and it's counter-ideology. Yeah. So this ideology that you opened up with is means garbage to me when they say you must look after your team, and then when I want to look after my team, you're going to charge me a tax to do so.
They'll punish you for it, that's right. And just on that, a quick point to make just on that too is that, and again, it's the ideology. The ideology, that's in play today. This ideology drives division between employees and employers.
Correct.
Right? The rules that you have to comply with as an employer now, not just FBT and tax and money you have to pay. Now, if you give a person a company car because they need one for 12 months, and you say, okay, well, we need that car back now. If you haven't set your documentation, your contracts up, your agreements up properly, that is considered now that employee's right. You can't get it back. Yeah. So you can punish there as well.
It's a good point.
And then you're driving division between employees and employers. And these laws that get put in place require us all now to go and create new contracts and new policies and roll out new things and new rules, and employees start to distrust us. Yeah. So
you get that division.
You do, yeah, and that's the ideology at play.
And I'll give you an example, because one of the things that I've encouraged, again, all levels of government at all sides. There's not just two sides, unfortunately, the system, but that's another discussion. But local, state, and federal government, and again, anybody that's shown up, we've said the same thing too. Is that it's not about business owners. Stop using this language of business owners. Micro, small, and medium businesses are a community of 10 million people. Think about that, listeners. Micro, small, and medium business. Yeah, they're owned by one, two, multiple people. The community that they employ, the community is one, regardless of whether they're owners or workers, because a lot of owners are workers. I'm an owner, but I'm a worker, right? The community of that is 10 million people. It is over 70% of the workforce in this country, right? When Tim talks about the big end of town, I think it's 2%?
2% at best, yeah.
2% at best of the total workforce of Australia. Yet the laws are there to protect 2%. Where are the laws to protect 70%? And hence why I've got Tim on the show from the HR Cartel, hence why all micro, small and medium businesses need to have now access to somebody like yourself. And there's plenty of other organisations. I've worked with you, so I'm obviously, part of my brand protection is I only recommend people that I know and are going to do a good job, right? And obviously you're one of them. People Squared do work with us as well. They're very good. They're not as focused on IR as you are, but they're great as well. These are the two companies that I've worked with and would recommend. But for the listeners here, you need to have somebody. Ignorance is not, and this is a question I'm getting to, ignorance is not a defense, right? It's gone. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, you could claim ignorance. I did not know that. I wasn't sure of this. I wasn't aware of this. Let's talk about that now, Tim, because you talk about this, and you got a couple of case studies that you flicked to me over different regions. Like there was a cafe owner in Sydney, I think it was, that just got raped over the coals, with stupid fines and penalties. But let's talk about that so that the listeners understand. Ignorance is not a defence.
That's right. Yeah. We can use that. That's a perfect example to use for your listeners too, and we can use that one knowing that this particular franchisor did have a previous issue, which is why they got targeted. That's not the point of the case example. The point is ignorance is not a defence, right? So you got 8 franchisees, and they're standalone entities. They're their own businesses. They own the company. They directly employ the employee. They pay them. The franchisor, according to the ombudsman and the courts, didn't do enough to ensure that the franchisees were doing the right thing. Now, the franchisees made the mistake. They didn't pay the right wages. All they had to do was back pay the wages they missed. The franchisor, who didn't even employ these people, got stung with a $1.4 million fine.
$1.4 million. Do you know how many businesses would fall over? Because I don't know many people that have got $1.4 million to pay in a penalty, right, on something they don't control.
That's right. Yeah. Now, let me put another filter on this, or another lens on this. That was before January 1st this year. Now, after January 1st this year, that is called wage theft.
Yeah, let's talk about wage theft. Right. Good segue.
So the wage theft.
You can tell you run podcasts, mate. There you go. So let's talk about wage theft. So explain to the listeners what wage theft is, and then everything else around it that's important to them. Yeah,
okay. Wage theft is the criminalisation of underpayments. In as fewer words as I can say it, it's now criminalised. It's been criminalised that you can't do that now. So before January 1 this year, it wasn't a criminal offence. Now it is.
And some would say, oh, so rightly so. However, and they'd be right in the big picture, but break down what falls into wage theft, because that's a very, very strong title and the definition, right? And for those doing the wrong thing, it needs to be.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
Now explain what falls into it.
Let me give you real examples of at least 4 or 5 companies where my team has been working with since January really. Time off in lieu, overtime, RDOs, right? Rostered days off. Awards govern these things, whether you can or can't do it and how it works, right? So if you have so the rules are, let's say I'll pick any sort of example out. Time off in lieu, you let your casuals build up time off in lieu over time so they can have a paid day off at some point.
So if they do 2 extra hours this week, they can take 2 extra hours somewhere else.
And they tell you, don't pay me, I want to have paid time off later, right? Well, you can't do that for a casual. You mostly can't do that, right? You have to pay that casual the money they earned on time.
You have to pay, so that people are clear on this. There's no more grey, because I'll break it down, because obviously we're dealing with 1,200 plus cafes.
Yep.
You can't have somebody put in 2 extra hours without pay right now, even if they agree that next week they'll take 2 hours off with pay.
Especially casuals.
You have to pay them when they work.
Yeah, especially casuals, and that's the relevant point with your listeners, right? Now, even with a permanent, part-time or full-time people, you may let them take time off in lieu and build toil accruals up, and that's what toil is, TOIL, time off in lieu.
Depends what's in your contract, Sid.
That's right. But the awards will also have rules. Now, many businesses, and for years they've been doing this, will just let you build and build and build your bank up and have time paid off whenever you want it. And that's beneficial for employees. They want to do it. It gives them more time off later.
Well, it's part of flexible work conditions.
Well, it is, right? But
I can work 5 extra hours today, but when I need the 5 extra hours off, I'm going to take it then. Yeah. I mean, the whole thing was actually started by government, correct me if I'm wrong, to make it flexible for workers. Now they're going to penalise the flexibility.
Yeah, if you get it wrong, you're going to get a severe penalty too, because let's say, for example, this award you may work under says, well, within 6 months it has to be paid out or taken. And when it's paid out, so if it's taken, it's hour for hour. But when you pay it out, you can only bank time off in lieu hours if it's overtime. You can't bank it if it's less. So when you're paying it out, well, it's not hour for hour anymore. It's now double time and a half or double time or whatever it was, right? So if you don't do that and you let them go beyond or past the cutoff, well, now it's wage theft. So not paying on time, not paying the right penalty rate.
Just let's go back to that on pay, because that's a big one, right?
Yeah.
Guys, and remember what we said, ignorance is not an excuse. So missing payroll. Oh, it was a public holiday. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
That's
so
right.
if the public holiday's on a Monday and your Monday is your payday, then you better pay them on the Friday.
That's right.
Because technically, and there'll be a lot of people going, what the, right now? Technically, that's why I said wage theft used in the right sense should be there. Nobody should be thieved of their wages at all. But imagine this situation which falls under wage theft. Public holidays, we just come off the back of 3 weeks of them. Technically, Easter weekend is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. If your payroll is on a Friday and your payroll, or you would not technically get paid till Tuesday, that is wage theft.
Yeah, that's right.
The money has to be in their account. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It is, yeah. There's one extra bit to say about it. It becomes wage theft. It becomes criminal when it was intentional. Now, what does intentional mean? I'll go back to the example I gave before with the time off in lieu accruals and you're helping them build up and that sort of thing. There's no chance you've got any ability to say that wasn't intentional because you kept the accrual record. You entered the agreement. You've intended to run that. You can't say it wasn't intentional. Payroll that you missed because of public holidays. What, you didn't know it was a public holiday?
Yeah.
Well, try and explain that one away. That's probably going to be intentional, right?
Well, you made a choice. I made a choice to pay you Tuesday instead of paying you Thursday. That's intentional, right?
That's right.
And
you can't. I can't see a place where you're going to be able to argue that was an accident. You know, you knew that banks operate a certain way. You run a business, you're supposed to know. But that's the key thing. What companies have been. And this is important. The important thing to say here. What employers have been doing for decades and decades and decades. Things that benefit the employee, the things the employee wants you to do for them, it's now criminal.
Yeah.
You can't do it. And this wasn't done in consultation with employees saying, hey, employees, what do you want us to do for you as a government and to impose on your employer? This was the union side of the party coming in and saying, this is what we want to the government. Yeah. And the government saying, yes, tick that box. So it's not for the employee's benefit. Yeah. Don't think that's an excuse either. They don't care about that. It's a technical compliance.
So what about the Better Off program? Where they use the better off. If the employee's better off, and the employee says, "Hey, you know, I'm happy to take time and I'm happy to work 5 hours overtime because I'm happy to take half a day off in a month's time." And you know, so do they still apply that rule? Are the employee's better off overall?
This is a pretty. It goes technical here, but I'll explain it really easily.
I'm a dishwasher, remember? I explain it in simple terms.
I'll explain it really easily. So the term better off overall means that this is a test that the Commission applies to enterprise agreements to see if someone's better off and they can agree to the terms that you've negotiated. But it's used elsewhere. So better off means we can use the word offsetting as well, you know, where you pay more than you're supposed to so you can offset overtime and penalties and not worry about paying it. The thing is, does your contract, we go back to the importance of the contract, is your contract written in such a way that says that you intend to do that? Because if it's not, then you can't rely on that. You can't say, well, my intention was that this offsets public holidays. Now, you might pay $10 an hour more, but your contract doesn't offset anything. Well, you've got to pay double time and a half on the public holiday still. You can't rely on that compensation, that buffer you've prepaid, whether they work it or not, to say, well, they're being paid in advance for the public holiday. This is what offsetting is called, right?
Yeah.
If your contract doesn't say you intend to do that, then good luck trying to fight that battle. You can't do that. So your contracts are important in that sense. The other thing is here that there's such things called individual flexibility arrangements. If you go to your modern award, whatever award you're under, right at the top of the award, there's a flexibility section. Click on that. And it says things that you can be flexible on, and that's penalties, overtime, hours, when hours are worked, and a list of things there. Use the IFA. If you have an employee that says it's better for me if I don't get paid those penalties here and I just don't work these hours, and that suits me because I can be home with my kid and that sort of stuff. Employers all day long would say, yeah, no worries, go ahead and do it. It's fine. Yeah. But if you get audited and there's public holiday or overtime hours worked that weren't paid at penalty rates and that sort of thing, and you can't justify why it was done, documentation wise, you're definitely at risk there of getting it wrong and falling into a massive trap. Now, not to frighten people, but just so we're clear, that example we gave of 85 Degrees, the franchisor in Sydney, they've got the $1.4 million fine. Well, after January 1, that's $8 million. And for the individuals that made the mistake, they're getting $1.5 million. Yeah. Or you're going to go to jail for 10 years. Yeah. So that's how it's stepped up now.
And has anyone been trialled yet?
Not
since
yet.
That? Not yet.
We've got no case law yet.
No case law. So that's going to be the key one. And I mean, this might sound, and I'm just going to, because I'm going to get some simple questions for our listeners that I know that they'll want to ask. So I'll ask on their behalf. But if this is sounding like a migraine to you, like it is to me, then that's the problem. If this is sounding too hard to follow and understand, like it is for me at times, and I always say I'm never the smartest person in the room, but I'm never the dumbest, right? Or very rarely. It's confusing to me.
That's the
and
entire
I've been
issue.
in this industry for 36 years. I've had businesses for 23 years, and it is the most convoluted, it is the most complex system, and that was part of what I wanted Tim to come on the show, because there'll be people listening to this going, I'm finding this hard to follow. You are normal. You are the reason why. You are the reason why the Coffee Commune exists. You are the reason why the HR Cartel exists. You are the why, because it is hard to follow. It is complex. It is unjust. It is unfair. So if you're sitting there right now listening to this going, I don't understand, I'm lost, maybe read the transcript because it'll be easier to follow. But you are not alone. And that is why the Coffee Commune exists and why the HR Cartel and other companies like it exist, because it is a system that is appalling and completely. And we've seen cases, we saw people like George Columbaros, which, people want to call him a thief and call him this and call him that.
Great example.
George is a great example, ran great businesses, and there'll be people just going, but let's break it down to what it is, not the opinion, the data. Manual payroll. Think about this, guys. He was running a manual payroll with something like over 1,000 staff. The rates back then, without getting technical, different rate before 7 a.m., different rate after 7 p.m., different rate after 10 p.m., different rate after 12 a.m. He's running something like 20 venues, over 1,000 staff that operate across different times. Manual payroll. None of this click in digital, click out digital, which now calculates it all for you. And the payroll team got it wrong. These are the facts, not the opinions. Now, the payroll team got it wrong. He self-reported. Now, here's the part when people want to call him all sorts of names. And I don't know George very well. We've met many times, but I don't know him very well. So I'm not talking about the caliber of a person. I'm just talking about the facts of the situation. As if I was a barrister or if I was a lawyer, this is how I'd be talking about the facts. The payroll team got it wrong. There was no misintention. There was no trying to rob anybody. He self-reported. That's the clincher. No one went into his business and audited him. No one went in there and said, hey, we're checking your books because we hear this, right? He self-reported to the ATO and said, my payroll team has got this wrong over X amount of years.
And I'm fixing it.
And I'm fixing it and I'm paying them. And then what happened? Yeah. He got hit with some ridiculous, he paid them all and he got hit with the fine, which fine is fine. But he got hit with such a big fine that it caused the whole organisation to go into liquidation. Now, again, let's play the facts, not the opinions, because some people go, he deserves it. Well, does he? Okay. If you're listening to this and never made an error, I'll let you do that. But if you've made mistakes before, shut up and listen. Now you don't have 1,000 people employed anymore. Great. So where are they lined up? How much of your taxpayer money are they using? So tell me where the productivity in that is or the benefit is. Self-reports, pays back the people. Yep, hit him with a fine, right? No, but hit him with a fine so big that he has to close everything down. I'm giving you the simplistic parts of it, but you can find out for yourself without the egos and emotion. Now we have a case where 1,000 people don't have a job. Now tell me how that's productive or good for Australia. And tell me where that sits in what's fair and not fair in this country. Yeah. Because I love your saying, Tim, there's nothing fair about fair work. So it's not a rant, guys. It's an example of. Now, if he'd done that today, he'd be in jail.
Crucified. Now, there's one thing I'll add to what you said there. He was the poster boy for the existence of the Fair Work Ombudsman, and they will do it to anybody. And I'm not trying to be alarmist about that. Do me a favour, if you've got the time and the inclination to do so, go to Fair Work Ombudsman and subscribe to their newsletter and see what emails you get over the next few days. Every day they're giving you names and of people, people like you and I who are trying to run companies, their company names, and they're putting them up in headlights all through the media and in the Federal Circuit Court over $2,000, $1,000, $3,000. Now, they will make an example of you.
Yeah.
And that's what they did to him.
Tim, and obviously I've got a predominant profile in Australia, and I'm happy to share this story with the listeners. And think of this, guys. So the previous government, being Scott Morrison and Peter Dutton, rang me at the time and said, what can we do to help industry? This was through COVID. What can we do to help your industry? And I said, you need to lift the 20-hour capping on international students. So at the time it was 20 hours. International students couldn't work longer than 20 hours. I said, one thing that's going to help is lift that capping, allow us to employ them more, up to 37 hours. Because we've got less workers at a time we need more. A lot of people have left to go back home. If they can work more hours, then, that helps the industry. Within a week, it was done. Right. Scott Morrison lost, and I was not a fan of Scott Morrison. I'm very public about that because I don't play politics, Liberal or Labor. I pay the best person for the job, right? Because just the same way I employ my people and my company is how I look at the business of politics, because it is a business, right? So Anthony Albanese comes in, makes some great promises. I'm going to lower cost of living. I'm going to do the rest of it. Great. Hey, I believed him too. Everyone believed him. His government then turns around, the IR and HR side of the government, says, no, we're now getting rid of that and we're capping hours at 48 hours a fortnight. So 24 hours per week, the international students. And I'm giving you the backstory so you understand because I'm going to come back to Tim's point. 24 hours a week. Well, automatically that affected 3 of our staff. Now, in our cafe, we only run a cafe to service our members and our regulars in the area, right? It's a cafe, it's a team of, say, 8 people. It also rolls out our events and celebrations and functions and all the rest of it. 3 of our people, that had a devastating effect. Now, not only did they change the law, they changed it to be applicable within 6 weeks. So they gave everybody 6 weeks notice to go from full-time staff or full-time hours down to 24 hours per week. So 2 comments I made. One, we've got 3% unemployment right now when they brought this in 3 years ago. We've got 3% unemployment, so there is no access to extra staff. You're now diminishing the workforce, the capability of the workforce lower to 24 hours. But the big one is this. How can, with the cost of living crisis, how can people afford to live on 24 hours a week? And the short answer is they don't. So what happens? They either go back home, and stay with me on this, listeners. They either go back home, which some did. They end up in depression, which some did. Because how do we now survive on 24 hours? Then now you've got 8 people living in one apartment, living off rice and tin tuna. Well, they do the third thing, which is the point I want to highlight. They come to people like me and say, come on, boss, can't you pay me 10 hours cash? And I've gone, no, for many reasons. 1, that's not compliant. 2, it's not right. And 3, I'd be the next poster boy, right, in jail, being crucified, when my intention would be I know you can't live off 24 hours a week. I don't want you in depression. I don't want you to have to leave this country and go home. But my hands are tied. So unfortunately, we've had to let go of people, right, that couldn't survive on 24 hours because I was not going to be that next poster boy. And that's one of the reasons we've got you involved in the HR Cartel, to keep us squeaky clean and compliant, not only around the things we know, but around the things you don't know. Because I don't want to be the next unfortunate story like George Columbaros. And I know that might sound extreme to some, but there's a lot of messages in that story, a lot of messages. You need to be compliant. You need to be up to date. You need to ensure that your people are looked after and that they feel looked after, but that it's a compliance looking after. There's a lot of you need to. And in the interest of time, the easiest way and the best way to do that, Tim, is to obviously have somebody like you that they subscribe to, that they have access to, that they get their information, to be part of the Coffee Commune, who also feeds that information. Tim posts regularly on our app around law changes and new things to look out for. There is no such thing as ignorance anymore as an excuse. I can't stress that enough. But I want to ask you a couple of quick questions, quick answers, and then I want you to give us 3 things that cafe owners can do or should do post this, right? But a couple of quick ones. The casual conversion. Explain that in black and white in simple terms for people.
Okay. Yep. Used to be called conversion, and now it's called pathways to permanent. That's another change that this government.
All cafe owners are obliged, all businesses are obliged.
All businesses
that employ people casual to do what?
So they're obliged. Now, The confusion now is that everyone still believes they have to issue the casual employment information statement every 6 months, and when they hit the date that they're able to nominate to become permanent, to give them a notice saying you're eligible to nominate. So one good thing is all that's gone. You don't have to do that stuff anymore.
No.
That's one good thing. The change is that once a casual hits this milestone that's marked by the new legislation, they can just simply write to you saying, I'm permanent now.
And you've got no choice.
Well, you've got to have a pretty reasonable and sound business case as to why that can't be the case.
So to shorten it, and the listeners can look into it further, but this is just an awareness section, let's call it.
Yep.
Your casuals that have been with you between 6 months now and 12 months, depending on the size of your organisation, has the right to ask for a permanent position. Mm-hmm. And you better have a damn good reason why you can't, but otherwise you'll be breaking a law. Next one. I've got staff. Do I pay them for their breaks or do I not pay them for their breaks?
Now, this comes down to your contract. We get back to the contract again, right? So if you pay above an award rate and at any level, it could be $1 more, or it could be $6 more, or whatever it is, and you don't have a clause in your employment contract that says the intention of that additional payment is to offset entitlements, then you have to pay as per the award specifically says to pay.
So if it's a minimum 3-hour shift or minimum 4-hour shift, and the award says that you can, they must have a half an hour break every X amount of hours, then and you don't have to pay for them. So you have to follow the award. That's right.
Now, do I pay for breaks? Yes and no. The half-hour break, which is a mandatory break that you have to have every day, you don't pay for that break. Yeah. Some awards will say that you can have a 10-minute break at the start of the day and also at the end, or you might be able to combine them. Depends on the award. But if you've got people recording time for the day, this is a good question we get asked a fair amount.
Yeah. Record keeping.
So if you've got timesheets being submitted and they're not submitting a break, and you didn't ask them to work through that break, or their manager didn't ask them to, or the expectation is they do work through the break, deduct that half an hour. You got to deduct it. If you don't,
you're setting a precedent.
Well, you are, but also you're demonstrating to an auditor, a Fair Work Ombudsman inspector, if they come in, that you didn't allow people to have a break, and that beyond 5 hours, if they didn't have that break, we're now going to penalty rates.
So then we get into document keeping, right?
That's right.
I was going to say the record keeping you must keep. So, and there's no excuses anymore, guys. You've got things like tender, found you. There's a whole heap of them, right? Deputy. They're all pretty good now. Like years ago, there was some that were better than others. My advice there is you go digital. You fingerprint in, fingerprint out. It does all the awards for you because it pumps them all in. So you don't need to, and it also saves a lot of money and efficiency. So there's one key takeaway for everybody. Get a hold of a digital system. They're not expensive. I think Found You, which is what we use, is somewhere between $6 and $10 an employee per week. It's not expensive. Think of the money it saves you from bookkeeping and record, but it keeps your records, it keeps everything, and then it also making sure that you're logging your breaks on there, because Tim makes a great point. They might have had the break, but if it's not logged, then to an inspector, they don't know they've had the break. The other one, do you pay for people's lunches or not? Hospitality, right? Do you let them eat for free on your venue? That's a big one we get asked. Technically, that's an FBT.
Technically, it is. Yeah, it is. And look, it's up to you with that one. If you want to,
but you can't use that in lieu of. You can't say
you can't. Yeah,
I underpaid them 5 hours, but I give them lunch every day.
Food. Yeah, you can't. It's unlawful, or it's actually illegal to pay them with anything other than money.
And that comes under wage theft then.
Yeah, that's right.
So jail terms, big hefty fees.
Yeah.
So got listeners, no more. No, you're not allowed to be paying them in food and then offset that and say, well, I don't pay them for their break. I don't pay them for an extra hour work, but I fed them and they drank 5 coffees today. Yeah. It's irrelevant.
That's right. Now, just on that one extra thing, some employers out there, someone listening to this podcast may even provide accommodation and that sort of thing for people. Now, it is lawful to deduct out of someone's wage. Now, if you want to pay someone, if you want to give someone food every day of the week, and you need to change the practice that you're doing right now to pay them the money and not pay the money in place of the food. Well, this is what you got to do. You got to pay them in full and have an authority to deduct form or agreement between you both to allow you to deduct a certain amount of money from their pay to cover the food they just eaten. If that's what you want to continue to do, that's how you solve that problem.
The key is documentation, right?
Yeah.
That's the key takeaway, guys. I mean, people listening here, you've got to document everything. So it starts with, and we'll segue into, I'll summarize, and then I want to hand over to you, Tim, the 3 things that people, well, actually, no, let's go, because I don't want to cover it for you, but the 3 things that people should be doing. After listening to this, what are the 3 things that they must do? Of course, one of them is they need to be working, it's alongside somebody like yourself. I mean, This is not about promoting. Tim hasn't paid us. He hasn't been paid to be on the show. This is just, I said it before, if you're listening to this and you've got a migraine, if you're listening to this and you're going, I don't understand, that is why Tim exists and his business exists and other businesses out there like that. But, that is the one thing you need to do. You need to have somebody in your corner is the best way to put it. And that is what Coffee Commune does. That is what HR Cartel does. We're in your corner to help you navigate the complexities. Now, remember, we give our cafe owners free membership, right? We do it for free because we know the importance of being educated, up to date, and compliant. So if you haven't got your membership, you need to get one. Send us an email, hello@coffeecommune.com.au, and we will give you a free cafe membership, which gets you access to our app, which allows you then to follow legal information, HR information, IR, finance, insurance, marketing, all sorts of stuff, penalty rates, on holidays, blah, blah, blah. But it gives you access to a community like people like Tim, because ignorance is not an excuse, and you need people in your corner that can help you navigate this. What else should they be doing?
Yeah. So first off, and again, I'm not promoting myself, but let me just say this. First off is the HR Cartel, I created a portal in preparation for the release of the wage theft criminalisation from January 1 this year. We launched this portal in January.
Yes.
This portal serves to ensure you can defend yourself whenever you make a mistake. The requirement, especially if you're a smaller business with less than 15 staff, or less than 15 systematic and regular staff anyway, the requirement is there's a code that the Fair Work Ombudsman website can give you, or you can download, or you can just reach out and we'll give it to you. And it tells you what they're going to look at to see if you can be excused from a wage theft claim or a criminalisation referral. One of those things on there, one of the most important things on there, is that you have taken steps to educate yourself and stay up to date with the legislation.
Yeah. So if they download it and they're part of your portal, that's part of the education.
That's the entire reason it exists. So you can protect yourself from a claim should you make a mistake in the future.
And where can they find this?
You go to www.hrcartel.com. In the right corner, it says join the cartel. Click on that, and there's a little application form down. All you want to know is who you are, what company you're from, and why you're interested.
Yeah, and that ticks a big box. That already shows that you are registered, you are vigilant, you are proactive.
You're trying to educate yourself.
You're trying to educate yourself on the HR and IR laws.
That's right. We got courses in there. We've got monthly webinars. We've got advice forums. You show this to the Fair Work Ombudsman, and they're going to say, yes, I agree. This is education.
Good.
And it has to be with an IR practitioner or a lawyer.
And we need to put that up on the app as well.
Yeah, sure. We'll do that. So that's the first thing. If you've got concerns around that, that's the first thing. Go and do that. You can be a member of that portal for free as well. Obviously, the paid options give you way more, but you can be in there for free. You can go and check it out. The second thing is... I'm going to skip over contracts. We've spoken about that already, right? The second thing is...
Just get your contracts. If you don't have one and you don't know where to start, then contact Tim and his team, and they can work with you on that because they've got templates, they've got all sorts of stuff. So it's not a big headache. So don't think, contracts, it's just reaching out, making a phone call, and sending an email, working with the guys, and they'll send you templates, and you can go straight away on it.
Absolutely. Second thing is adopt a process of your wage checks, right? Now, if you've got a team of 10, then get 2 people and pick a 4-week block for those 2 people every quarter, and just do a 4-week check on against the timesheets and what they were paid. Are they right? Are they not? And tick that box. Do that at least twice a year, preferably 3 to 4 times a year.
Again, it shows proactive, right?
That's what you have to do to be able to defend yourself. If you find something wrong, just correct it. Now, it's reach out to us for advice, of course, there. But you need to check. If you're not checking, there's no way you can defend yourself if something does go wrong. And we're all going to make mistakes. To make no error about that. It is a very complicated system. Some of these awards you have to read literally 3,000 to 4,000 words before you can understand what time your people can start. Right, we are going to make mistakes. Do these checks every quarter. You don't have to do it for everybody. Just pick a segment of your workforce. If it's big,
It's good advice.
pick more. Right, and then the third thing is going to be protect your company from loss of clientele, supply agreements, and these types of things. Over the next few years, this government has already said it is going to remove your ability to protect yourself via non-compete clauses and these types of things. Now, non-compete clauses, what the government is saying is that they're going to stop you from stopping your ex-employees working for competitors.
That's a big one, isn't it?
It is. Now, there's a bit to say to this, but the reason they're saying that is because they believe that improves productivity. It doesn't. It's not. And even if it did, by the time they did anything about it, it's not going to be enough to turn anything around.
Yeah. And let's just set the scene. Prior to this, and just so that the listeners understand, you could put in your contract that there's a restraint of trade, there's a non-compete. Now, the legal abiding over the top, which is fair and equitable, is you can't stop somebody from earning a living. And that's fair and equitable to me.
Yeah.
You can't stop somebody from earning a living, but I can stop somebody leaving my organisation, working for a direct competitor for, say, 6 months or 12 months, and giving them my database, my IP, all the rest of it. What you're saying now is...
Yeah, what I'm saying now is the government has declared they are removing that right or that ability, and they're making it unlawful. Now, what does that mean? Well, we don't really know just yet because they haven't released the legislation, but what employers rely on that clause to do is exactly that. So what we're telling is now our new we've rewritten our contracts just this week.
And you're working with Jana, I believe, too, on this matter as well.
Yeah, so we've rewritten ours. We've got a whole new way to approach this now to get away from the old traditional non-compete. And we're using case law to do it. There's a case just last week in Victoria where a company's non-compete was upheld by the court. So the courts don't agree with our government. The last 3 years, right, you'd be forgiven for thinking these things aren't worth the paper they're written on, these clauses. And that has been the case for some time. But in the last 3 years, there's been numerous cases where the employer's been given injunctive relief. They've been given interim orders.
Which means that the judges actually agreed with the employer
the commercial
and turned
impact,
it around.
Yeah, the commercial impact is so severe that it is going to affect your company, and we will uphold the orders. This person cannot do that. They've got orders in place, right? So the courts are agreeing.
But you need to have the contracts. You need to have the clauses.
They've got to be in there, yeah. Now, what we're doing is we're actually targeting specific behaviours to get to this early in our contracts. I've done many investigations over the last number of years, CEOs, board members, you name it. I've done many investigations. One thing that really infuriates me is companies that lie and steal IP and set up a competing company. One of the early measures, for example, one of the early signs of that is that they're sending confidential information to their own personal email address. Now, we can find that out pretty quickly, right? That's a sign to me that you are going to do something naughty soon, and it's either compete or go to a competitor. This case in Victoria last week demonstrated that action was taken by the employee, and that was one of the big reasons the court said, hang on, you intended this is malicious, I'm stopping you from doing it. So we're targeting the signs, the behaviours, the indications elsewhere in our contracts outside of non-compete clauses. If that's a reactive clause, we're going proactive. We're going to stop that from happening when it happens, not when someone leaves.
So what sort of examples?
No, so we'll insert, for example, a confidential information breach clause.
Yep.
And that will say, firstly, that breaches of confidential information are gross misconduct, which means that puts us in a position where we can terminate instantly, essentially. And the things that determine a confidential information breach are things like emailing to your personal email address,
coffee recipes or
IP, confidential information.
Target hit lists and status reports on new business,
CRM exports, all sort of stuff. Or sharing any confidential information or IP with a person who is not a customer, a potential customer or a stakeholder via email.
Yeah, so being proactive on it.
Yeah, storing IP and confidential information lists.
Yeah, very important, especially for the restaurants listening, right? That have got unique recipes.
Yeah,
we're seeing that at the moment with Brookie and the other lady, right? I mean, so it is going to be one of the things on the radar for the next 3 years.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. But you have to. We started off talking about cost.
Yes,
productivity and cost. The government's answer, which I just said there, Chalmers and Albanese are saying that non-compete improves productivity. or it doesn't, right? To give someone the ability to freely leave your employment, steal your employees, your client list, and go to your competitor and take you down does not improve productivity. You need to protect yourself from the ideology at play today. It's the ideology that decides what happens. They don't intend to destroy your business, but they will.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand that and look ahead, which is why we're identifying proactive signs that tell us someone's up to no good, and we're going to put you in a position where you can terminate.
Yeah,
before it happens.
And that's a great point to finish on, Tim, because we could talk all day. It's about being proactive against the ideology, and we finish in how we start. The ideology is what drives it all. The intention could be good, but as we've seen in the last 3 years, a lot of the execution is not. There's a few things we didn't get to hone in on, like same job, same pay, but we can do another follow-up episode. Otherwise, this is already one of the longest we've ever done because there's so much to cover. But, and I'm happy to do a follow-up on stuff like that when we see a bit more. So maybe in a few months, we'll do a check-in. We'll do a check-in. We start to see what's coming out, because things like same job, same pay, which will heavily affect our industry if they start enforcing that. Chefs that have been around for 1 year and chefs been around 20 years are going to get the same pay. Well, that's ridiculous, and same with baristas. But you've heard the 3 things that Tim said to be proactive. If you can't remember any of them, remember one thing. Join the Coffee Commune community if you're not part of it already, because you'll get access to Tim anyway, as in you'll see him and it'll jolt your memory. And 2, jump on the HR Cartel website and join his community. There is a free, entry-level membership there to join for free. Jump on it so that you're at least in there getting educated, because ignorance is not an excuse. And again, if you've got a headache, I apologize. If you've got a migraine, I really apologize. And if you're feeling depressed, I really, really, really apologize.
That's my fault.
However, that is why we do things like this, because we want you to be proactive. We want you to be aware of what's happening. So again, might have to listen to this episode a couple of times or read the transcript. That'll be available, because there is a lot of stuffed information. And let's put it simply, Tim, the more headache, the bigger the headache, means the less prepared they really are. So if you don't have any contracts for your staff, then you should have a migraine by now, and you need to get onto it, because they will be coming after people. They will be looking for money. The ideology says they want it compliant, but the execution will be, well, if we can fine you, because if the ideology is compliance, they don't need to slap you with $1 million fine or $100,000 fine. They just give you time to fix it, and get on with it. But no, it comes with a fine. They collect the money, then they go do whatever they want with it. But I mean, that's another issue. But guys, I'm just trying to make sure that we really understand the severity of this. You've got an expert that's just been on this show for over an hour talking about, and this is only, not even scratching the surface, where if we were to talk about other industries and different stuff, but you need to get on top of it. Tim, I can't thank you enough from the HR Cartel. Congratulations on everything that you're doing. I know that you're helping a lot of businesses in different areas across different stuff. You're helping a lot of our community already here at the Coffee Commune. I wish you great success. We'll have you back on the show. You owe me a couple, mate, after your podcast, but also subscribe to the HR Cartel Podcast. A fantastic podcast. I love it. I mean, Timmy gets really rolled up. He was really calm today, which is a good thing. But until next time, Tim, thank you again.
My pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. Reach out if you need any questions answered. I'm happy to help.
Fantastic. Until next time, you've been listening to Phillip Di Bella. This has been There, Done That podcast at the Coffee Commune, where we're all about helping you accelerate your potential. That's a wrap for today. Keep listening for more episodes of Been There and Done That. The Coffee Commune is here to help accelerate your potential. We want you to be better tomorrow than today. Until next time, you've been listening to Phillip Di Bella. I'm the founder and managing director of the Coffee Commune, a place where the coffee community comes to collaborate.